Okay.
Yes, we are recording. You should see it.
Okay, that's fine.
So thank you very much, Robert, for attending this meeting. And I would like to ask you to introduce yourself. What are you doing? Who are you?
Okay. So I could tell you a lot about who I am, and every day or every minute, I would
Yeah.
probably give another answer. I would say that I'm a retired academic now. I retired about 2 years ago from NYU, New York University,
Mhm.
where I had been a professor for 40 years.
Wow.
And I'd say now my identity is mostly as an artist, as a maker of art. And I think when I first started my career as an academic, that is, as a professor, I was also an artist at that time, a theater artist. I was making
Mhm.
theater. I was had been an actor, and then a director, and then a writer in the theater. And I still write for the theater more than anything else, but I'm also a visual artist. I'm a photographer, and I make digital media. And so I've also have been a songwriter, and so I
Wow.
stay very active as an artist. And now that I'm retired as an academic, I spend most of my time making art, and that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And just it's been especially important for me during this past year of the COVID pandemic to document it visually. So I've done a lot of photography about how the pandemic has affected New York City, where I live,
Mhm.
and I've also documented the Black Lives Matter movement, which I've been
Mhm.
extremely involved in and supportive of through this past year. So that's been my work. Who am I? I have played many roles. I'm a father. I'm a I'm a son. I'm a brother. I'm a friend. I play many roles in my life, which,
Yeah.
and as you know, I'm a role theorist.
Yes.
So I will say at NYU, where I started in 1979, when I was hired as NYU, I was hired in an educational theater department. And my work was about teaching playwriting, directing, acting, educational theater, and
Mhm.
slowly developing a drama therapy from nothing, because there was
Uh-huh.
nothing like that at NYU at the time I was hired. And after a couple of years of doing all those things, and also I was also directing plays. It was crazy. I was doing everything, and I was writing. But drama therapy became, I developed the very first drama therapy course. I think it was in 1980. And
Wow.
it was so popular and people were so excited about it, including myself, that within a couple of years, I had a full curriculum, a state approved master's program by 1984. And that took up most of my time. So at that point, I was able to develop my own program or department in drama therapy and let go of the other work. And so that's what I did. So I'm the founding director of the drama therapy program at NYU. And in that work, not only was I developing the courses and teaching the courses and hiring people to teach the other courses, but I was also developing the field. One of the first things I had to do was convince people in the clinical world in New York City and nearby that they needed drama therapists as interns in their medical facilities. And I would go to hospitals, I would go to clinics, I would bang on doors and say, "You need us, you need my students to show you how wonderful this work is." And so that was one of my first tasks, and that, it worked well. And Maria Hodomarska, who
Yeah.
was one of my very has always been one of my closest colleagues, and she's still at NYU as the running the performance therapeutic theater
Yeah.
part of the program, and also the internship program. So she took that over and she did a brilliant job. And then also I was tasked to do the important writing in the field. I wrote the first textbook in the field, which was published in 1986. I wrote case studies. I just, and then I began to develop theory for drama therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very brief summary of who I am
Wow.
in drama therapy and in my life.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It was nice to hear it. So I know that you developed like the role theory and the role method. And as I remember correctly, it's based on grounded theory, or it was the part. The grounded theory was just some like the scientific method for developing. Is it correct?
Could you repeat that? I didn't hear you very. It was based. What did you say it was based on?
That you used grounded theory for developing the role theory.
Oh yes,
and role
yes,
method.
that's right. That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and but I should say that the origins of role theory had many sources. Yes, it was grounded theory in developing the theory of role theory as it relates to drama therapy. But long before I did this work, Moreno, J.L. Moreno, the founder of psychodrama, had developed a psychodramatic-based role theory, which I knew very, very well. I studied Moreno. I was very close to the Moreno family, especially Moreno's wife, Zirka Moreno. And I was a student of Moreno's for many years, and I studied with many of the people that he trained in psychodrama. So I knew that theory very well. However, I always felt that it was missing something. It wasn't fully developed, and I wanted to add something to it. So what I did in my development of role theory is I turned to two different sources. One was social psychology. And I looked at the work done by many of the early social psychologists like Irving Goffman and Ralph Linton and people like that, who looked at the self as a multifaceted entity, and who looked at how the self, what are the complexities of the self. And so I studied that work. I studied it when I was in graduate school, and I studied it as I was doing my writing and research, my grounded theory research. I also looked at very much the origins of theater. And so role theory became for me very much based on a historical reading of the types of characters, in Latin, the dramatis personae, that persisted over the thousands of years since theater developed. And I saw that there were repeated role types that one would find in early, Greek theater, in early Roman theater, in theater forms that came long before Greek and Roman theater, non-Western theater, but it was mostly a Western theater-based model. And I saw that there were certain archetypal roles that just repeated themselves over and over and over again through the thousands of years of history, right up to the present day. And I began to compile, I did a reading of, I think I based it on a reading of about 400 plays, which were the most widely anthologized plays of all in the Western canon of dramatic literature. And I looked at the role types that just repeated over and over again, and I began to create what I called a taxonomy of roles. And I related this theatrical, and this is not what Moreno did. Moreno didn't look to theater to develop his role theory, and he didn't look to social psychology to develop his role theory. So that's what I did that was different from Moreno, and I did a very, very systematic exploration of theatrical history, theatrical role types. I also looked at certain figures in psychoanalysis and psychology who seem to me very critical in developing a theory based on the notion of archetypes. You know, I use role types, role as archetype, a universal form. And so, of course, I turned to Carl Jung, who developed his the system of archetypes in order to explain the human psyche. So these were some of my influences. And then one other thing. In the late 80s, early 90s, when I was doing some early individual therapy work, because all throughout my career, as an academic, as an artist, and so forth, I continued to do clinical work. So I would see private clients, I would see groups, I'd see children, I'd see old people, I'd see adolescents, you know, the whole range. And I worked with people with a range of disabling condition, from physical disabilities to mental illness to what I would call a normal neurotic behavior, people under stress, post-traumatic stress, and so forth. And I noticed that in doing drama therapy, the same roles would repeat over and over and over again, the same archetypal roles that I discovered in theater. And so in creating my taxonomy of roles based in theater, these roles were also modified by my clinical work and looking at the kind of roles people would bring up spontaneously in their drama therapy sessions with me and with other people as well. So that's sort of the origins. That's the grounded theory-based origins of the development of role theory.
I'm thinking like you developed more roles and lately you just shorten it to have less roles. Maybe why you did it?
Why did I develop the role?
You started with a bunch, I think like 126
roles. Yes, and I brought it down to a smaller size. Yes, because I realized that if I wanted to take this theory into practice, that is move from role theory to role method, a method of working. If I stayed with 123 roles, it would be overwhelming. It would be too much because I wound up, building an assessment instrument, an instrument of clinical practice, all these things. So I had to limit. I couldn't say, okay, let's work, and I want to help you understand your personality in terms of 123 roles. Wow, that seemed overwhelming and impractical, both for academic, academic assessment purposes and for purposes of clinical practice. So I began paring down the system to less and less roles. I got it at a point when I was working on the assessment instrument, which is called role profiles, to 60 roles. But in working clinically, again, I'm not going to say, okay, we're going to work with, here are 60 characters, let's work with them. I tried to get that into smaller and smaller form. And in fact, what I did was looked at, rather than imposing it on clients, I would say, okay, well, tell me a story. And in that story, I'd like there to be, at first, I would say 3 characters. I'd like there to be a hero. I'd like there to be a villain, and I'd like there to be a guide. And so there were 3 basic roles, and I called them role, counter role, and guide. So it came 3, and then later on I added a 4th, which I called the destination. And I developed this approach, which basically had, from 123 roles, had 4 roles, right? And I developed this whole approach, which I call the hero's journey, which in some ways is based on a model developed, it's developed by so many different people. Joseph Campbell was one. He's sort of famous. He wrote a book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. He wrote many books.
I have it right behind me.
You have it right behind you. Okay, so that was one. But the other source for the hero's journey was, again, my reading of classical literature, classical dramatic literature. and noting that every sort of epic story, beginning with the Greeks and going up to Shakespeare and then beyond, were all stories about a hero is on some kind of a journey. And the journey is for self-knowledge or wisdom or perhaps something simple, money, success, fame. And on the journey, the hero meets a major obstacle. The obstacle could be a villain, somebody is standing in his way. The obstacle could be something internal, his fears, his insecurities, and so forth. And because he's on his journey, he's trying to get to some destination. The destination is often in theater, it's often wisdom, knowledge, success in some ways, right? So the hero is on a journey toward a destination. There is an obstacle in the way, internal or external. And to get through the obstacle and reach the destination, his or her destination, the hero requires help, a helper. And I call the helper figure the guide. And that became the basic model for the rest of my profession of drama therapy that I've always used, and I still use it today. I use it in my therapy. I use it in the way I think about the world, and certainly I've used it in all my role as educator in drama therapy. So from 123 roles, we have 4 basic archetypal roles, and that's it.
Beautiful. The most beautiful things are many times the simplest one.
Right.
As you mentioned, the role and the counter role.
Yeah.
Could you describe it a little bit more? Because I know that many people is just asking how it's going. What is the role? What is the relationship between the role and counter role?
Right. Well, the basic sort of philosophical idea is that a human being is not one thing. A human being is a multitude of things. I call the things roles, but different people call them different, have different names for the parts of us. I also, as a kind of a postmodern thinker, I also always believe that there wasn't necessarily in the search for identity. I question the notion that on our search for who we are, we're not looking for us to discover ourselves as one thing. I don't even believe in an essential core self. I don't believe in an essential core anything. I believe that our lives are lived in multiples. So whatever I am and whatever role I play in my life, I'm a father. I always recognize that in being a father, I also have to recognize another part of myself, a counterpart of myself. So on the other side of the father, there are other things. For example, a son. Every father knows that to be a good father, he needs to be in touch with what it means to be a good son. Mm-hmm. And every good person, a good woman, the good woman of Setsuwan, if you remember that Brechtian play, every good woman needs to know that she is only as good as she can confront the darker parts of herself, that is, the bad parts of herself. Mm-hmm. And so thus arose the concept of counter role. Whomever I am at any given point of my existence, in order to embody that and accept that part of myself, I have to let in another side of that. To be good, I have to let in the bad. To be father, I have to let in the son. To be teacher, I have to let in the student. And I also realized in doing therapy over many years that the counter role isn't necessarily the opposite of the role. The opposite of good is bad, the opposite of bad is good. Well, if I said to you, Jakub, what's on the other side of the role of mother? what would you answer?
Honestly, I don't know because I'm not mother and I cannot be. So as you mentioned,
No, but
it
you're
could be
without thinking
daughter
too much about it. I'm just, what comes to your mind? You think of the role of mother. What's on the other side of mother?
being
What's a
like
counterpart of mother?
angry, angry monkey.
Angry monkey?
Yeah,
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, so that's not an opposite of mother. I'm not going to analyze you now, and I'm not even going to work with you. But I'm saying that's not an opposite of mother. Most people say mother, father, mother, daughter. Sort of a typical response. But you said angry monkey. Well, that's beautiful. We can work with that in drama therapy
yeah.
and discover what does that mean, angry monkey, and how does that relate to mother, and how do those two roles work together? Which is the goal of drama therapy. That is to take the role and the counter role and find a way that they work together within one system, within one psyche. So that's the notion of counter role. It's a role or a series of traits that are on the other side of let's say, a more conventional role. That's it. And the thing that holds those two together, the role and counter role, is what I call the guide. The guide is the figure that can sort of help one person live in the tension between the two, or the contradictions between the two. So in my theory, any client has to deal with the contradictions in themselves based in a role. And sometimes it's hard to hold that together. If I'm a spiritual person, if I'm a priest or a imam or a rabbi or some holy person, and I don't deal with my darker side, then what might happen? I might become an abusive spiritual leader, which has led to things like abuse in the Catholic Church, priests abusing children. The theory is that, the therapeutic theory is that if somebody who is in a very powerful position has the ability to look at the darker sides of themselves and make peace with that and find a balance between the two, then that person will have less of a need or a desire to act out their darker parts.
Now I'm so much thinking about the angry monkey, and also I'm thinking about the Star Wars. How the many of the things, the Star Wars, the role of the Anakin Skywalker is like.
Yes. Well, Star Wars is a great example. I haven't seen, I saw a couple of the Star Wars movies, but I don't know it that well. But I can tell you that Star Wars was modeled after Joseph Campbell. It was modeled after the hero. It's a typical hero's journey movie. In fact, most, how shall I say, science fiction movies or adventure movies or novels and so forth are some iteration of the hero's journey. It's the old story. It's the old classic story of the hero's journey. And the hero, again, is on a search for some greater knowledge or understanding or success, fame, and something stands in the way. That's the basis of all stories. All stories.
Yeah. I have the last question for you, and it wasn't prepared. It just came to my mind. What do you think are the most important things for the drama therapist as a therapist? If you find one, as maybe for the person or for to know that or to exercise it, whatever comes to your mind, like what is important for somebody who wants to do a drama therapy, who wants to be a drama therapist?
Right. Well, years ago, I wrote a paper called a 4-part model. I think it's called Training the Drama Therapist, a 4-part model. So, now I would say there are more than 4 parts, but certainly one part that's very, very important is know thyself, know yourself.
Mm.
And I would add to that now, I'd say know yourself in relationship to your environment, to your family, to your culture, to the larger world. How do you get that self-knowledge, cultural knowledge, family knowledge, to the extent that when you're treating other people, you're treating other people from the point of view of being knowledgeable about who you are in relation to other people, drama therapists. What's particular to drama therapists, I would say, and this comes to a knowledge of drama therapy itself, is this understanding of what we were just talking about, of role and counter-role in God. And which is, and I would say the two most important two. One is role, and two is story, as we were just talking about. How does one tell a story? What does a story mean? How does one work with a story dramatically? How does one take a story, which can be literary or on a page, and move it into the body, move it into play, move it into an experience of drama? And explore a story in such a way that it turns someone back to knowing more about themselves in relationship to others, in relationship to larger issues of culture and so forth. So I would say, again, story, role, self-knowledge, understanding of how to work with drama therapy materials, including play, an understanding of theory. I mentioned one, just role theory. It's not the only theory in drama therapy. There are many others. I'd say one other thing that's very important. I would say it's very important for a drama therapist to believe that change is possible. Mm-hmm. That change is possible, even in the face of evidence to the contrary. When there are terrible things that happen in the world, murder, abuse, genocide, war, and on, poverty, abuse, and so forth. How does one hold on to the notion that hope springs eternal, that change is possible? That's a big question. And I think as a therapist, a therapist has to believe that change is possible, but also has to go through periods of questioning whether change is possible or not, given all these horrendous things that human beings can do. And also to understand that question from a dramatic point of view, to understand that all drama is based on exploring that question. You know, look at the classic plays, King Lear. You know, King Lear is an old man. He's falling apart. Everything. He feels abandoned. His family has abandoned him. His colleagues. His power is all gone. Two of his daughters are very evil. How does he hold on to a belief that there is something else for him to live for? That's the big question. That's the dramatic question. That's at the center, I think, of understanding what drama is all about. And so, with all of those questions and issues available to understand the nature of a human being and the nature of a healing process, that is part of the training of a drama therapist, in my opinion. Mm-hmm.
Ooh. I will think about all of things a lot of time. I think you gave me material for some research, work, or whatever. So maybe it will.
By the way, I want to mention one other thing, which has been very much on my mind, especially during this year. So we've been living through a pandemic. In my country, the United States, over 500,000 people have died of the pandemic. It's a plague. We've also lived through, in my country at least, a reckoning of race and the horrors of treating other people based on the color of their skin or their belief system. And it's been a very, very powerful year. And in training a drama therapist, I think it's important to understand the questions of racial identity, sexual identity, all the identity questions that are being raised this year. And even the big question of life or death based on plagues, pandemics, things that are out of our control, are the basis of all drama and all theater throughout the ages. And to see it in that context and to understand that all these things we've been confronting are stories that we've lived through, not only as human beings in our lifetime, but as human beings throughout time, throughout history, through all our time. We've all lived with these same issues over and over and over again. How can we do it better? How can we think about these issues in a better way to create a more humane existence for all of us? I think that's the big question that drama therapists have to answer it, with an understanding that that question has been the basis of all theater and all drama throughout culture, throughout history.
I think that, like, I was writing the self-identity paper when I was studying at NYU, and I was reading, like, I think 3 months ago, I was reading it again, and I think that most of the things I understand it just like the 3 months ago, not when I was like writing the paper, but now I think I can more understand what I was writing about and what the identity and discovering your identity. What is it? And what it means to you or me.
Yes, yes.
It needs some time. That's the real
Great. Well, it was a pleasure to talk to you, Jakub. You asked terrific questions.
Thank you very much, Robert.
I look forward to seeing you again someday soon in person.